shadow.
Before we begin, if you find yourself drawn to these darker territories of knowledge, consider subscribing. Your support keeps these explorations alive. Tonight, we venture into the most dangerous maps ever drawn. Charts that plot not continents or oceans, but the thin places where reality bleeds into dream and dream seeps back into waking life. There exists, hidden within Lovecraft's fiction, a secret cartography, not the crude sketches found in published stories, but detailed navigational nightmares that chart pathways between states of consciousness. These are not mere fantasy locations, but coordinates for actual transformations of awareness. Blueprints for the architecture of nightmare, made manifest. The maps speak of places with names that twist the tongue: the Plateau of Leng, the Cavern of Flame beneath the Sphinx, the Silver Key's infinite destinations. But these are not distant realms. They are conditions, states of awareness that can manifest anywhere the proper confluences align. What makes these maps truly terrifying is not their impossible geography, but their accuracy. Every gateway they chart corresponds to documented cases of individuals who crossed these thresholds, some returning forever changed, others never returning at all. The maps reveal that Lovecraft was not creating fiction, but transcribing intelligence gathered from sources that should have remained silent, serving as cartographer to territories that exist in the spaces between sleeping and waking, between sanity and revelation. The first map bears a warning written in trembling hand. These charts show not where to go, but where not to venture unless you are prepared for the journey to change not just your destination, but your very nature as a traveler. This warning becomes prophecy as we trace the pathways documented, following routes that lead not outward into the world, but inward into the architecture of consciousness itself. The gateways themselves are not fixed locations, but conditions, states of awareness, where ordinary doorways become portals to Kadath, where staircases descend not to basements, but to the underworld of red-litten Yoth. Consider the objects that become compasses when you're not looking: a tarnished mirror at the end of a hallway thick with evening dust, a door whose paint remembers too many hands, a stairwell that smells like wet stone and old rope. These are not metaphors, but navigational instruments, their surfaces worn smooth by the passage of consciousness between states. The maps document how attention, properly focused, transforms ordinary thresholds into active portals. A brass key, sitting forgotten in a dish, suddenly catches lamplight at 3 a.m. You notice it now, as if it were waiting, as if it had always been waiting for this particular moment of recognition. The evidence lies scattered throughout Lovecraft's correspondence, marginalia found in his personal books, fragments discovered in his desk after his death. In 1937, his letters contain coded references to navigational experiments and threshold documentation, phrases his biographers dismissed as creative metaphors, but which reveal themselves as technical terminology for consciousness cartography. The maps themselves follow principles that violate ordinary geography while adhering to the deeper logic of dream navigation. Distance is measured not in miles, but in degrees of psychological preparation. Elevation refers not to altitude, but to layers of consciousness, with higher territories accessible only to minds trained in specific techniques of awareness expansion. Each territory operates according to its own temporal logic, its own physics of possibility. The Plateau of Leng exists in reverse chronology, where effects precede causes and memory becomes prophecy. The underworld of Yoth transforms descent into ascent, darkness into illumination. The Silver Key's destinations multiply infinitely, each choice creating new pathways that branch into parallel territories of experience. These are accurate descriptions of consciousness states achievable through proper preparation and navigation. The most disturbing aspect is their interactive nature. The maps do not simply describe territories, they create access to them. The act of reading becomes the act of navigation, each traced pathway opening neural routes that correspond to the cosmic highways documented. Your attention, following these descriptions, begins to resonate with the frequencies necessary for threshold recognition. The knowledge works on you as you work through it, preparing your consciousness for encounters that will come later. Outside your window, fog moves between streetlights with the patience of old clerks. Somewhere, water presses against a wharf, and wood answers with a damp sigh. A cat crosses the alley with the care of a priest. These are signals, a slow choreography that primes the navigator to feel the world as a stage set just before the scene change. The curtain is always half raised. The audience breathes together in the darkness. As we examine these cartographic confessions, we must acknowledge our own position as readers of forbidden atlases. The act of studying these maps begins the process of navigation. To trace these pathways with your mind is to create neural routes that mirror the cosmic highways documented. The knowledge changes you, prepares you for recognitions that will come later, when you encounter your own gateways disguised as ordinary doorways, mirrors, or moments of transition between sleep and waking. The maps whisper their first lesson. Every threshold is bidirectional. What can travel from dream into reality can also pull reality into dream. You are already part of the cast. Your role, simple: witness, traveler, student. Your caution is the ticket that lets you stay until the house lights dim. The next revelation will not be a monster behind the curtain, but the lineage of the map itself. Who carried it, who copied it, and why the ink refuses to dry. Introduces Lovecraft's secret cartographic work as hidden maps of gateways between consciousness states rather than physical locations. These maps document actual transformation coordinates with documented cases of individuals crossing thresholds. The chapter establishes that Lovecraft was transcribing rather than inventing, serving as cartographer to territories existing between sleep and waking. It emphasizes that gateways are conditions of awareness rather than fixed locations, and that studying these maps begins the navigation process itself. The fundamental horror emerges from the map's accuracy and their revelation that the act of charting these territories changes the cartographer, making them both navigator and destination in a cosmic geography operating by dream logic rather than physical law. The maps did not originate with Lovecraft, though his hand gave them their most precise expression. They are copies of copies, each generation adding details while losing others. A cosmic telephone whispered through centuries of occult transmission. To understand their true significance, we trace a lineage of minds that carried this cartographic contagion from its source to a desk in Providence. The paper smells of coal soot and salt fog. The ink shines like oil on water. Each carrier holds mask and lantern, walking by starlight along corridors of libraries, attics, and locked drawers. The earliest extant chart hides in Johannes Kepler's Marginalia, sketched between elliptical calculations like frost beneath a window pane. Picture the lamplit study, the scent of ink and aged paper, meticulous diagrams of orbits giving way to different geometry. In his private notes, he names them somnial coordinates, vectors not through space, but through states, angles that align attention with the great dreaming mechanism of the cosmos. Mars refuses to follow perfect circles, and in wrestling with elliptical orbits, his mind opens to deeper patterns. He discovered that certain geometric relationships, when held in mind with sufficient intensity, could serve as keys to unlock doorways between the waking world and territories where mathematical harmony becomes navigable landscape. Stars burn above Prague, a quill scratches, snow muffles the street, the lamp gutters, the room tilts. He records the tilt, and a doorway remembers. From Kepler, the papers drift to John Dee, whose Mortlake study keeps crystals like small moons in velvet. His obsidian mirror still rests in the British Museum, its surface worn smooth by centuries of gazing. Visitors report strange reflections, glimpses of territories that should not exist in any earthly glass. With scryer and seal, with Enochian tables that look like architecture, he extends the atlas into angelic way stations, territories accessible through communication that revealed themselves as regions between different layers of dreaming reality. He teaches that matter can be tuned. Glass becomes lens, becomes altar, becomes instrument, the key and the gate nested in a single pane. In the Thames mist, barges clink, and the river carries rumors as faithfully as any courier. His notebooks describe how crystal becomes compass. When consciousness learns to read the angles properly, each facet a doorway to specific regions of the mapped territories. The transmission accelerates with the Romantics, when poets treat sleep as republic and visa. Coleridge wakes from a vision and composes lines like a man emptying pockets after a long return. Dome, caves of ice, honey-dew, milk of paradise. His Kubla Khan was not opium-induced fantasy, but careful documentation of a journey through mapped territories, his poems serving as both travelogue and warning. The Pleasure Dome becomes architectural blueprint, its measurements corresponding to structures found in the deeper territories. In his notebooks, a sketch, a terrace above a river, a stair that descends into green gloom, precisely echoing later descriptions in Providence. The sacred river, Alf, flows not through earthly caverns, but through underground passages that connect different regions of consciousness. The opium is a mask. The mechanism is rehearsal, meter, and rhyme, acting like footsteps counted in the dark. Then Poe, courier of thresholds, receives a copy by routes no police could diagram. His tales of mesmerism and premature burial were not Gothic inventions, but case studies, drawn from attempts to navigate mapped territories using altered consciousness techniques. A descent into the maelstrom charts not a whirlpool of water, but a vortex of perception, the spiral you ride as identity loosens into observation and terror trims itself into method. The maelstrom's spiral motion mirrors the consciousness patterns necessary for gateway navigation, each descending circle representing a deeper level of awareness. He writes with salt in his mouth and wind in his ears. The boat's timbers creak through syllables. The story serves as instruction manual disguised as adventure tale, teaching readers the principles necessary for safe passage through similar gateways. German philosophers added discoveries to the growing compendium. Kant's Critique of Pure Reason contains coded references to transcendental geography, territories accessible only through specific configurations of rational thought. Schopenhauer expanded these philosophical charts to include territories accessible through aesthetic contemplation, his descriptions of the will corresponding to driving principles that shape the deeper regions of the maps. By the time the papers reach Providence, the bundle is a palimpsest. Lovecraft's gift is not novelty, but sight. He recognizes consonants between Kepler's ratios and Dee's glass, between Coleridge's river terrace and Poe's spiral, drawing a single coastline where others saw islands. His Providence study became a nexus where centuries of cartographic transmission converged. He writes, as steward, not sovereign, describing territories like a civil engineer surveying bridges in fog. He sets proper nouns like pylons, Ulthar, Leng, Kadath, so future travelers can triangulate by sound alone. The transmission network behaves like a living thing, selective and stubborn. It seeks minds with particular mixture of rigor and drift. The scholar who measures, the dreamer who returns, the skeptic who still accepts a key when pressed into their palm. Knowledge wants continuance. It rides letters, it rides rumor, it rides the soft theater of memory, which is how it arrives in your room, by screen light at night, the ink translated to pixels, the whisper to bandwidth. If the map has chosen correctly, you will feel the handle turn without your consent. The next gate opens inward. Now we examine the gears within the mechanism. The gateway between reality and dream operates not through incantation, but through coordinated pressures, attention, memory, symbol, repetition. A dream becomes a door when the mind is primed to treat inner images as outer coordinates. The trick is simple, the cost precise. Begin with attention, that thin beam of flashlight in fogged basement. Lovecraft narrows yours with proper nouns and recurrence. Say Ulthar enough, and it accrues momentum. The mind loves maps. It tags the word with cats, with dusk, with particular bell sounds. It starts seeking the shortest path between tag and feeling. The shortest path is ritual, name, image, breath. The gate breathes with you. Each repetition carves neural pathways like footsteps wearing grooves in stone, until the word itself becomes a coordinate your consciousness recognizes as navigational instruction. Ulthar carries the weight of cobblestone and lamplight, of windows that glow amber at evening, of small bells that ring when doors open. The proper noun accumulates gravity through repetition until it functions as an anchor point in territories that have no fixed geography. You taste the evening air, smell bread cooling in windows, hear the soft padding of careful paws on stone. These sensory clusters become the handholds your mind uses to climb from ordinary awareness into mapped territories. Memory serves as mortar. Randolph Carter's path builds from a boy's Sunset Hill, brown grass, black fence, city of chimneys in orange light. Memory makes the unreal believable because it has texture. You hear wind in dead weeds, taste the cold. The sensory details provide scaffolding for consciousness navigating territories that exist primarily as states of awareness rather than physical locations. When memory arranges in sequence, it becomes road. The Boy's Hill leads to the Enchanted Wood, which leads to the 700 steps, each transition feeling natural because memory has been trained to follow associative pathways rather than logical causation. When the road is walked often, it becomes reflex. Reflex is the curtain softness. You pull, without knowing, your hand moves. The mechanism transforms conscious navigation into unconscious response, until accessing dream territories requires no more effort than opening a familiar door. Your fingers remember the brass handle's weight, the particular resistance of hinges that need oil, the way afternoon light falls across a threshold you have crossed 1,000 times in sleep. Symbols function as keys because they compress instructions into signs. A silver key in cedar box says, old, kept, chosen, fit for locks of no ordinary door. The symbol carries its instructions in the arrangement of associations it triggers. Silver suggests moonlight and mirrors. Cedar implies preservation and sacred storage, the combination creating a complex of meanings that prepares consciousness for specific types of threshold navigation. The yellow sign says, reading me is doing me. The symbol's power lies not in its appearance, but in its function as a self-executing instruction, a visual trigger that activates prepared responses in consciousness. The crooked angle in Keziah Mason's room says, geometry is permission. Non-Euclidean angles serve as symbols for non-ordinary states of awareness, their impossibility training the mind to accept navigation principles that violate everyday logic. You need not believe. You need to rehearse looking. The act of seeing becomes the hinge. The symbol works through repetition of attention rather than conviction of truth. Your eye learns to trace impossible angles until the brain accepts shortcuts through space itself. Repetition turns private practice into liturgy. Read many dream stories in sequence, and you learn rhythm, late hour, lamp, window, phrase that returns, door that does not. The cadence of prose, long-syllable tongues broken by short declarative bursts, lulls and wakes, lulls and wakes. The body learns when to tense, the mind when to yield. Stage manager dims house lights, curtain rises, the rhythmic ebb and flow entrains neural oscillations, synchronizing brainwave patterns with the text's temporal structure until reading becomes a form of consciousness alteration. Your breathing slows to match the sentence's measured pace. Your pulse finds the rhythm of recurring phrases. The repeated journey across the threshold, even if only in narrative, builds a pathway that becomes increasingly familiar. Yog-Sothoth is described as the key and the gate, guardian of thresholds, but step sideways and see, Yog-Sothoth is the pattern itself. It is the function of adjacency. When two unlike things are brought near, waking and dream, child and man, self and other, the space of between becomes active. In mathematics, this is topology. In narrative, it is transition. Where transitions are charged, doors appear. The entity is how we personify a rule so we can bear its coldness. There are materials. Sound can act like brace, as in Eric Zann's room. Music holds blackness at bay because structure resists entropy. Pattern resists flood. Angles can short paths, as in The Dreams in the Witch House, because the brain models space as relations, not coordinates. Twist the relation and you skip. Names carry weight because they are handles. Cats govern Ulthar because law is lived memory, collective, repeated, enforceable as habit. There are costs. The more you use the door, the more you pay identity tax. Carter fragments. Kuranes dissolves into his title, leaving a body in London Street. Walter Gilman leaks coordinates, and small teeth follow the new path. The idea acts on you. Your memories are re-indexed for navigability. You lose some friction that made waking world feel thick. The world thins. It is beautiful. It is dangerous. The next territory requires a guide who learned to navigate by losing himself completely, then finding the way home. You think it begins on a hill at sunset. It begins earlier, in a child learning to name. Randolph Carter is Lovecraft's mask for the self who dreams deliberately, keeping ledgers of images and debts. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, Carter pursues a city of golden domes glimpsed at dusk, a city that withdraws like stage set rolled into darkness. The pursuit is itself a map, each obstacle a symbol to master, each companion a function to accept. Carter's steps are concrete. He goes to the enchanted wood where trees smell like old books and wind like moth wings, learning that some doors are guarded by manners. The zoogs chitter in oak hollows, responding to courtesy rather than force. Their voices carry the texture of autumn leaves and careful secrets. He descends the 700 steps to the gate of deeper slumber, bargaining with drowsiness like toll. Each stone step wears smooth under countless dreamers' feet, slick with condensation that tastes of sleep and forgetting. He is taken by night gaunts, smooth, faceless, the feeling of falling from chair just as you sleep, and learns that what terrifies can carry you safely if you relax into its logic. The mechanic becomes lesson. Fear is rope, slacken, and it lowers you quietly. Their skin feels like wet leather stretched over silence. They ferry him through abyssal spaces where stars hang like distant lamps in caverns too vast for measurement. Carter learns their wing-beat language, the pressure of claws that hold without piercing, discovering that terror transforms into trust when approached with proper understanding. There are ghouls who dine on unclaimed dead. Carter discovers shockingly that his friend Richard Pickman is among them, a figure from waking life reassigns to function and dream. This is cartographic economy. Characters become bridges. The world wastes nothing. Pickman's artist eye now serves new territories, his human memories persisting, but repurposed. The ghouls' tunnels stretch beneath multiple realities, their bone-click language a grammar of scavenging that Carter must learn to navigate their underground highways. He passes gugs behind monolithic pillars, air-cold and smelling of stone, and something damp. The scene is not jump scare, but engineering diagram wearing mask. Their massive forms move with surprising grace through chambers carved from living rock, multiple eyes scanning while clawed hands perform delicate maintenance on ancient mechanisms. The pillars support not just structures, but dimensional boundaries, their surfaces inscribed with formulae describing the mathematical relationships governing dream geography. He seeks Kadath and finds the others, great, cold gods whose altars are stars and whose attention is not love. The city he wants has been stolen by them because it is his joy, and joy is powerful altar. The twist is that the city is his own childhood, Boston refracted by memory. The path to it is through acceptance. He must realize the city is his. The map is not strange. The map is mirror held at distance. The golden domes prove to be state house and church spires, seen through childhood wonder, their surfaces burnished by memory until they achieved luminous quality worthy of divine theft. This pursuit bleeds into the Silver Key. Carter, older, losing access to dream, finds a key in his grandfather's attic. The room smells of cedar and mouse droppings. Window stripe of dust glitters. The key returns him to boyhood, returning the map to factory settings. The attic serves as temporal gateway, its accumulated objects functioning as coordinates for different periods of personal history. Dust motes dance in afternoon light that carries decades' weight, each particle a suspended moment. The cedar chest exhales memories of winter storage, its brass hinges singing with time's voice. Then through the gates of the silver key turns the trick terrible and sublime. Carter passes beyond dream into the mathematics of identity, discovering he is one of many possible Carters. He feels all lives at once, river of selves under cold sky, shivering with unfamiliar constellations. Yog-Sothoth appears not as tentacle, but as lattice, all doors at once, all keys jingling. Carter acts and is acted upon. He becomes being called Scalba on Yadith, sees worlds with glass seas and mouths that sing equations. His hands are not his hands. He is exiled by fellow men because he is too much gate, too little human. The cost of deep mapping is here. The audience is warned. The idea can leave you with surplus of perspective and shortage of feet on your own floor. Yet the prose remains lullaby, ominous, yes, but soothing. We are promised, if we travel with attention, we can return. The curtain can be found in darkness by touch. Carter survives by remembering his center, not hero's heart, but Child's Hill at sunset. He navigates by smell of grass and fence, slat under palm. The Atlas's first rule returns: anchor unreal distances with concrete senses. The investigation sharpens. Carter's compass quivers toward territories that require different preparation. A plateau where time flows backward through memory. Caverns where descent becomes illumination. The next gateway opens onto landscapes where cause follows effect like faithful dog, and red light reveals architectures invisible to surface sight. Among all territories charted in Lovecraft's hidden maps, none presents a more complete inversion of ordinary experience than the Plateau of Leng, a realm where time flows not forward through cause and effect, but backward through dream and memory. The maps describe this plateau not as physical location, but as state of consciousness, where normal sequence of experience reverses itself, creating landscape where effects precede causes and memories shape the events they supposedly record. The cartographic details reveal Leng as high tableland surrounded by peaks existing in multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. The air tastes of copper and old snow, carrying sounds that arrive before their sources, footsteps echoing from paths not yet walked, bells ringing for hours not yet struck. Travelers report that approaching the plateau requires specific navigation, not movement through space, but movement through layers of time, each step taking the navigator deeper into historical strata that exist not as past events, but as living, accessible territories. The maps include precise instructions for this temporal navigation, describing how consciousness must be trained to perceive time as landscape rather than sequence. You begin by learning to read your watch backward, feeling minutes accumulate rather than pass, until the second hand becomes a compass needle pointing toward moments of increasing temporal density. The most distinctive feature of Leng is its cities, which the maps describe as being built not forward through construction, but backward through decay. Stone walls grow smoother as you travel deeper into yesterday, mortar sealing itself, cracks healing like wounds in reverse. The architecture begins in states of ruin and grows more complete as time moves in reverse, with buildings achieving perfect form only in the deepest past layers of the plateau's temporal geography. These cities are inhabited by beings who experience their lives in reverse chronology, aging from death toward birth, accumulating wisdom by forgetting rather than learning. They speak in languages that begin with conclusions and work backward to premises, their conversations flowing from goodbye to hello, from answer to question. Their masks, bone, lacquer, hammered brass, do not hide identity, but release it, one memory at a time, until only bright potential remains fluttering like moths inside glass. The maps chart specific routes through Leng's temporal landscape, each pathway leading to different historical strata, accessible to human consciousness. The avenue of returned ashes allows travelers to witness urns spilling soot that gathers into family faces, then collapses to grain. The market of unbought things shows coins leaping back into purses while bargains retreat into silence. Some routes lead to personal, past, futures, versions of the traveler's own life experienced in reverse sequence, where death becomes birth and every choice unmakes itself back to potential. You walk backward through your own biography, feeling decisions dissolve into possibilities, watching relationships unknit themselves thread by thread until they return to the moment before first meeting. Other pathways access collective temporal territories where entire civilizations exist in states of reverse development, their golden ages lying not in their futures, but in their deepest archaeological layers. Navigation through Leng requires tools that function according to dream logic rather than waking rationality. The maps describe instruments of temporal measurement that work by forgetting rather than remembering, compasses that point not toward magnetic north, but toward moments of maximum temporal displacement. The compass needle quivers toward instances where cause and effect exchange positions, where shadows fall before objects cast them. Travelers must learn to read these instruments by unlearning their ordinary relationship to causation, training consciousness to follow effects back to their causes rather than forward to their consequences. The thermometer measures not heat, but temporal temperature, its mercury rising as you approach moments of maximum chronological reversal. The plateau's most dangerous territory is the region the maps designate as the memory gardens, areas where individual and collective memories exist as physical landscapes that can be explored and altered. Here, childhood summers take the form of golden meadows where you can walk among your own remembrances, touching moments that reshape themselves under your attention. The gardens bloom with scenes from lives unlived, paths not taken, growing like vines that bear fruit of alternate possibilities. Travelers who venture into these gardens risk becoming lost in recursive loops of remembrance, where each memory leads to the memory of remembering, creating infinite regress patterns that can trap consciousness in temporal spirals from which escape becomes impossible. The maps warn in red ink that the gardens grow by feeding on attention. Look too long at one bloom, and it opens backward into the bud of your first encounter with sorrow. The maps include detailed warnings about psychological effects of extended residence on the plateau. Travelers who spend too long in Leng begin to experience their ordinary lives in reverse chronology, aging backward through their memories until they reach states of consciousness that predate their own birth. Some become trapped in these pre-birth states, existing as pure potential that can never actualize into ordinary experience. They report reverse birthdays, cakes reassembling candles, songs inhaled into throats like birds flying back into cages, until they reach the warm, amniotic hush of not yet, a state the maps annotate with a symbol like a closed eye over water, the plateau's climate is made of sounds returning to mouths and footsteps rising from stone. Fog moves upslope like spilled milk climbing into its bottle. Stars blink in reverse across velvet night as if careful hands were putting them away into labeled drawers. Your own attention becomes the weather vane. Point it at loss and watch the scene heal into before. Point it at triumph and witness its seed. Ahead lies a descent that ascends, a red-lit underworld where darkness makes the scaffolds of reality visible. Beneath the surface territories charted in Lovecraft's maps lies the most paradoxical of all destinations, the underworld of red-litten Yoth, a realm where descent becomes ascent and darkness reveals itself as a form of illumination more complete than any light known to surface consciousness. The maps describe Yoth not as subterranean cavity, but as dimension of experience accessible through downward movement that paradoxically leads to expanded rather than restricted awareness. The cartographic details reveal that access to Yoth requires specific type of descent that operates according to principles of inverse elevation. Traditional navigation assumes that moving downward leads to limitation and confinement, while upward movement leads to expansion and freedom. Yoth inverts this relationship completely. The deeper one descends into its red-lit territories, the more expansive consciousness becomes, until at the deepest levels, awareness achieves a state of illumination that encompasses perspectives impossible from surface viewpoints. Picture stone steps cut into basalt, the air cool and iron-scented, your lantern casting amber pools that shrink as red radiance grows. Each step downward widens the horizon like theater seats rising in tiers around a stage that expands rather than contracts. The maps chart multiple descent routes into Yoth, each requiring different preparations and offering access to different regions of the underworld's vast geography. The spiral of forgotten names begins in cemetery crypts, where worn headstones serve as stepping stones deeper into collective memory. The well of reflected faces opens through mirrors held at specific angles during the hour before dawn, their surfaces becoming permeable membranes rather than reflective barriers. Some routes begin with physical descent through caves, wells, or architectural structures, but the maps make clear that the true descent is psychological, a movement deeper into layers of consciousness that normally remain inaccessible to surface awareness. The physical descent serves merely as focusing device for the consciousness descent that constitutes the real journey into Yoth's territories. Travelers are advised to prepare with simple rituals, count 7 breaths per step, keep tongue resting on palate like a key on velvet, blink only on odd numbers as attention narrows toward the red glow below. The red illumination that gives Yoth its designation proves to be not ordinary light, but a form of awareness that makes visible aspects of reality that remain hidden under normal conditions of perception. This red-lit consciousness reveals the underlying structures that support surface reality, the archetypal patterns, the causal relationships, and the fundamental principles that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The illumination carries warmth that penetrates understanding rather than skin, casting shadows that show hidden connections between seemingly unrelated surface phenomena. Under this revealing radiance, walls become transparent, displaying the mechanical principles that maintain their solidity. Time shows its gears and springs. Causation reveals its pulleys and counterweights. You can see how a promise supports a city like architectural trust, how grief routes traffic across a family like bridge spanning dark water. The underworld's geography consists of vast chambers connected by passages that follow the natural contours of consciousness itself. Each chamber represents a different depth of awareness, with deeper chambers offering access to increasingly fundamental levels of reality structure. In shallower halls, individual memories hang like tapestries, rooms arranged exactly as they were on winter mornings, the smell of oranges and dust, crooked pictures on stairs you can touch and feel their weave loosen under your fingertips. The chamber of personal archaeology contains layers of memory arranged as navigable strata, each level corresponding to different periods of psychological development. Deeper chambers house collective unconscious patterns manifesting as navigable terrain, marketplaces where cultures trade permissions rather than goods, law plazas where edicts are carved into air like constellations, amphitheaters where histories rehearse themselves until audiences know lines by heart. The most distinctive feature of Yoth is its population of beings who have achieved permanent residence in the underworld's illuminated territories. These beings, which the maps describe as the red-lit ones, are former surface dwellers who have learned to exist permanently in the state of expanded awareness that Yoth's descent makes possible. They appear as humanoid figures whose skin glows with the same red illumination that lights the passages, their features bearing traces of surface identity, but refined by prolonged exposure to depth consciousness. Their voices carry harmonics that resonate through stone, words arriving through vibration as much as hearing. They serve as guides for newer travelers, teaching navigation techniques necessary for movement through the underworld's increasingly exotic territories. They demonstrate how to read red light as contour rather than color, how to breathe in fours so thought settles like silt in calm harbor, how to recognize when the chamber you stand in is also the idea you are thinking. The red-lit ones warn that the underworld's illumination is contagious, prolonged. Exposure gradually transforms surface consciousness, creating permanent changes in perception that persist after return to ordinary awareness. Surface phenomena begin revealing their underlying structures even under normal lighting conditions. Shadows display their architectural functions. Reflections show their role as consciousness navigation tools. Some report persistent transparency to life, a thinning where backstage catwalks remain visible even when the show begins. The maps counsel balance through simple safeguards, a phrase to hum like scaffold song, a coin warmed in palm as anchor, a sketch of the room you intend to return to. The illumination follows travelers upward, creating feedback loops between depth and surface that permanently alter perception of ordinary reality. Ahead waits the source of all instruction, a cavern where sleeping gods whisper blueprints through flame. Deep within the mapped territories lies perhaps the most dangerous of all destinations, the Cavern of Flame, a realm where the boundaries between divine consciousness and human awareness dissolve in the presence of sleeping deities whose dreams generate the instructions that guide surface reality. The maps describe this cavern not as physical location, but as state of consciousness, where the sleeping gods become accessible to human awareness, their whispered instructions offering both ultimate knowledge and ultimate transformation. The cartographic details reveal that the cavern exists simultaneously beneath multiple surface locations, accessible through any point where the proper conditions of consciousness and circumstance align. The maps chart these access points with astronomical precision, showing how celestial alignments and psychological states combine to create windows of opportunity for entry into the cavern's flame-lit territories. Venus rising at dawn over water while you taste copper pennies, Mars in conjunction with Saturn as childhood fear surfaces unbidden, Jupiter's transit across your birth meridian while wet leaves smell like memory itself. The flame itself proves to be not ordinary fire, but manifestation of divine consciousness in its most concentrated form, burning without consuming, casting light that illuminates thought rather than surface. The sleeping gods who inhabit the cavern exist in a state that transcends ordinary categories of waking and sleeping, consciousness and unconsciousness. Their forms shift like smoke given weight. Sometimes humanoid figures draped in robes that flutter without wind. Sometimes geometric patterns that pulse with organic rhythm. Sometimes pure voice emanating from arrangements of stone and shadow. Their dreams generate the fundamental patterns that structure all surface reality, while their whispered instructions provide the templates for every possible experience. You can hear their breathing, slow, deep, the rhythm of tides measured in centuries rather than hours. Each exhalation carries fragments of instruction. Each inhalation draws experience back into the dream source for processing and redistribution. The instructions whispered by the sleeping gods take multiple forms, each requiring different levels of preparation to receive and understand. Some instructions manifest as mathematical formulas that describe the hidden relationships underlying physical reality, equations that explain how attention creates mass, how memory generates gravity, how love functions as fundamental force-binding particles into patterns of meaning. Others appear as geometric patterns that serve as blueprints for consciousness navigation through impossible territories, mandala-like designs that fold like maps and unfold like wings, each pattern a guide for turning through corridors that should not exist. The most advanced instructions take the form of direct consciousness transmission, where the god's awareness temporarily merges with human consciousness, a bright pressure at the back of your eyes, a lattice lowering through your thoughts, then lifting away, leaving behind a new sense like a fingertip you never had before. The maps include detailed warnings about the transformative effects of receiving these divine instructions. Human consciousness that comes into contact with the sleeping god's whispers undergoes fundamental alterations that persist long after departure from the cavern. Recipients report permanent changes in their relationship to time, space, and causation, seeing mathematical formulas underlying emotional relationships, perceiving multiple probability streams simultaneously, experiencing reality as conscious entity rather than passive stage. The cost manifests as colors too transparent, sounds with seams showing. The backstage catwalk, visible above every scene, the cavern's geography, consists of multiple chambers arranged around a central flame that serves as the focal point for the sleeping god's dream consciousness. Each chamber contains different categories of divine beings, with deeper chambers housing gods whose dreams generate increasingly fundamental aspects of reality. Near halls hold personal archives, furniture from old apartments, a mother's winter coat, the scrape of a chair leaving bright rings on wood. deeper chambers widen into collective architectures, markets where laws trade like coins, observatories where myths catalog themselves as constellations, libraries whose books whisper footnotes into your ear as you turn pages that feel warm as skin. The deepest chambers house city ideas, blocks, and avenues made of principles where you can walk an axiom like a street and feel its cobbles press arguments into your souls. The red-lit ones wait at intersections, their faces lit by inner ember, former surface folk who learned to breathe flame without burning. Their speech carries chord and overtone. Their gestures sketch diagrams that hang in air like smoke, refusing to disperse. They teach practicalities, how to ground yourself with a coin in palm, how to step sideways when a chamber is also a thought, how to refuse an instruction politely when it is too large for your current bones. The flame at the cavern's center burns with colors that have no names in surface languages, casting no shadows because it illuminates from within, revealing the luminous structure of whatever it touches. It breathes without consuming, each pulse a heartbeat of creation itself. The maps counsel simple safeguards. Count breaths in sevens. Keep a phrase in your mouth like a handle. Remember the room you intend to return to. What touches you here continues touching. Some return with gifts for reading rooms as diagrams. Others find music shows at scaffolds and requires new forms. A few cannot bear theater light's quiet falseness and will only meet you at dusk, when the world admits its shadows honestly. The next territory requires not individual courage, but collective will. Gateways that manifest only when multiple prepared minds align their attention on identical coordinates. Among the most perilous territories documented in Lovecraft's hidden maps are those accessible only through collective navigation. Gateways that manifest when multiple prepared minds focus their attention simultaneously on the same coordinates, creating interdimensional passages that no individual consciousness could access alone. These collective gateways represent both the ultimate expression of the map's navigation principles and their most dangerous application, opening territories that exist only as long as the navigating group maintains its unified focus. The cartographic details reveal that collective gateways operate according to principles of consciousness amplification that mirror mathematical relationships governing resonance and interference patterns. Picture tuning forks struck in sequence, their vibrations building until glass begins to sing, then crack, then open. When two or more minds trained in the map's navigation techniques synchronize their attention on identical coordinates, their combined consciousness creates focusing effects that can breach dimensional barriers impervious to individual navigation attempts. The mechanism is precise. Attention doubles with two minds, but with three. A new quality emerges, like a chord blooming from single tones. The maps annotate thresholds with careful precision. 3 navigators for shallow liminal halls, 5 for dream topographies, 7 for cities, 11 for confronting a principle in its mask. Past 13, the risk shifts from collapse to fusion. The territories accessible through collective navigation exist in states of radical interdependence with the navigating group's consciousness. These realms have no independent existence. They manifest into being through the group's unified attention and dissolve back into potential when that attention disperses. The maps describe these territories as consensus realities that operate according to the collective, unconscious patterns shared by the navigating group, creating landscapes that reflect the deepest archetypal structures common to all participants. A group of scholars might manifest libraries with infinite corridors where books whisper theorems in languages that taste like copper and starlight. Artists working in coordination could open galleries where paintings move between frames, their subjects stepping from canvas to canvas in slow processions that follow the rhythm of collective breathing. Historical marginalia record several successful collective expeditions. A Viennese salon in 1799 that walked together to a library city where books rid their readers, the air thick with the scent of old leather and the whisper of turning pages. A New England circle in 1913 that ascended a stair made of whispered vows, each step solid as granite beneath their synchronized footfalls. A nameless cabal under sodium lamps in a parking garage in 1997, whose breath made fog patterns that resolved into an archway of frost. All three groups maintain the mask of ritual, identical scarves, identical coins warmed in the right hand, identical phrases repeated until meaning vanished and function remained. The maps chart territories they discovered, the archive of unspoken agreements where social contracts exist as navigable architecture, the museum of collective dreams where civilization's sleeping visions take physical form, the observatory of shared fears, where archetypal terrors wheel through calculated orbits like planets of anxiety and recognition. More dangerous are the collective gateways created by groups whose members bring conflicting approaches or incompatible psychological structures to the navigation process. These dissonant collective territories manifest as unstable realms where conflicting consciousness patterns create chaotic landscapes that shift unpredictably between different configurations. The maps warn of schismatic architecture, where buildings tear themselves apart and reform in contradictory patterns, or cacophonic topographies, where the very ground undulates with the clash of irreconcilable wills. One navigator's childhood fear of water transforms the territory into drowning chambers, while another's claustrophobia simultaneously creates endless open spaces, the landscape convulsing between contradictory geometries. Gravity reverses when the pessimist's attention strengthens, colors drain to monochrome when the depressive's influence peaks, then burst into impossible spectrums as the synesthete's awareness surges. The methods of collective preparation are quiet and exact. Sit in a circle so that knees nearly touch. Align inhalations on a count of 4 and exhalations on 6. Let blinks fall on prime numbers. Place a bowl of clean water at the center to collect stray reflections. Place a dark stone beside it to drink excess heat from thought. The room should smell faintly of cedar and rain. The lights should be low enough that faces dissolve into presence rather than features. Each participant carries a mask not to hide but to unify. Identical surfaces strip personal narrative from the field. Names are placed in a dish, along with a silver coin. For the duration, you answer to no one and everyone. For stability, harmonics matter more than head count. The best expeditions are choirs, not crowds. The maps name 3 archetypes whose alignment produces durable passage. The counter, who holds rhythm and numbers, the watcher, who maintains image fidelity, the holder, who bears memory and returns it unchanged. When these 3 are present in any quantity, the portal gains tensile strength, and the territory can be surveyed, sketched, and returned to on later nights. Mathematics enters as companionship, not tyrant. 2 watchers per holder, Fibonacci spacing between phrases, golden angle turns of gaze around the circle to prevent standing waves. The most advanced collective territories are those accessed by groups who have learned to merge their consciousness temporarily, while retaining individual identity threads. These navigators report experiences of expanded awareness, where they simultaneously perceive through multiple sets of eyes, think with combined intellectual capacity, and feel emotions amplified by collective resonance. Yet the maps include urgent warnings about consciousness merger. Some navigators become so accustomed to collective awareness that they lose the ability to function as separate individuals. Identity begins to braid. Thoughts arrive with plural pronouns. The idea acts on you as ensemble, smoothing your edges until you fit the chord. The dangers have their own glossaries. Bleed through is when the consensus continues without the meeting, and you find Tuesday walking with Sunday's weather. Overshadow is when one member's private symbol colonizes the landscape. A childhood staircase inserted into a desert, a mother's ring appearing in every handrail, drawing the group into a single life like a whirlpool. Fracture is when synchronized clocks keep different time, and nobody notices because the cadence still feels right. Remedies are practical. Break eye contact. Introduce a foreign texture, a handful of salt, a cold key. Name the room together. Each navigator maintains a private anchor, a personal memory or phrase that remains exclusively theirs throughout collective navigation, functioning as lifelines back to individual consciousness. When collective navigation succeeds, it changes how you walk alone. Your private dreamways feel wider, better lit by steady red dusk, as if Yoth lent you a traveling lamp. You recognize the meta-story as architecture. Recognition gathers like a corridor. The next revelation waits not in distant territories, but in the recognition that studying these maps has already changed the navigator, that the reader has become both the territory being explored and the consciousness doing the exploring. The most profound revelation, contained within Lovecraft's hidden cartography, emerges not from any single map territory, but from the recognition that the maps themselves function as gateways, transforming readers from passive observers of exotic geography into active navigators of the very territories they study. This recognition cascade represents the ultimate expression of the map's interactive nature, the moment when consciousness prepared through cartographic study realizes that the act of reading these charts has been navigation all along. The cascade begins with the gradual recognition that the territories described in the maps correspond to experiences already present in the reader's own consciousness. The plateau of Leng's reverse chronology mirrors the backward flow of memory during deep introspection. That strange recursion when you remember remembering, when childhood summers fold backward into the moment before you knew they would end, each recollection dissolving into the one before it, until the whole hill slides back to a child's breath fogging a window. The Silver Key's nested territories reflect the recursive structure of attention during focused meditation, the way awareness can turn inward and discover infinite rooms within rooms, each containing smaller versions of the same essential space, cedar in the nose, cold brass under palm. The underworld of Yoth's illuminated depths correspond to the expanded awareness that emerges during profound psychological descent. Those moments when grief makes everything transparent for a week, beams and trusses exposed behind the drywall of habit, the stage seen from catwalk height, while the house still believes in the show. This recognition creates a feedback loop between map and territory that fundamentally alters both elements. The maps begin to function not as static descriptions of fixed locations, but as dynamic navigation tools that adapt their information to the reader's developing capacity for recognition. Paragraphs you skimmed now tug like undertow. A name you once passed over now hangs in the air with bell tone and dust. Simultaneously, the territories themselves begin to manifest more clearly in the reader's experience, their previously hidden features becoming accessible through the recognition that the maps have made possible. That staircase in your apartment building develops new acoustics, each step carrying harmonics you never noticed before, the air cool and smelling of stone and something damp. The mirror in your hallway occasionally catches light at angles that suggest depth rather than reflection. Your dreams begin to include architectural details that feel mapped rather than imagined, rooms arranged exactly as they were on winter mornings, the smell of oranges and dust. The cascade accelerates as the reader realizes that their own consciousness has been gradually transformed through the process of studying the cartographic information. The mental preparation required to understand the map's navigation techniques has created the very consciousness states that the maps describe as necessary for territorial access. Learning to read descriptions of impossible angles has taught your visual cortex to process spatial relationships that don't conform to Euclidean geometry. A crooked corner in an old hallway makes your balance swing as if space had shortened. Practicing attention to recurring proper nouns has created neural pathways that respond to pattern recognition with increasing sensitivity. Following the map's careful cadence has entrained your consciousness to recognize threshold states that previously passed unnoticed. The reader discovers that they have been unknowingly training themselves for navigation through territories that were always accessible but required the proper preparation to recognize. The most disorienting aspect of the recognition cascade is the realization that the distinction between reader and navigator, between student and traveler, was itself a navigational tool, a temporary framework that consciousness used to prepare itself for recognition of its true relationship to the mapped territories. The difference between reader and navigator was scaffolding, a temporary brace so the new bridge could hold weight while curing. It falls away with a whisper. The maps reveal that consciousness and territory exist in states of fundamental interdependence, each creating and being created by the other in recursive patterns that extend infinitely in all directions. You are not reading about the Dreamlands. You are creating them through the act of attention. The territories are not waiting to be discovered. They are manifesting through your capacity to recognize them. The cascade creates what the maps term territorial consciousness, awareness that recognizes itself as simultaneously navigator, territory, and navigation process. This consciousness can access any mapped territory by recognizing the correspondence between the cartographic descriptions and its own internal landscape. The silver key reveals itself to be the recognition that consciousness contains infinite nested levels of access, each key opening doors to rooms that contain their own keys to deeper chambers. The cavern of flame becomes accessible through recognition that divine instructions are constantly being whispered through ordinary inspiration and intuitive understanding. That moment when a solution arrives unbidden, when creative insight feels received rather than generated, when understanding blooms with a completeness that suggests external transmission. You begin to notice the gateways embedded in ordinary experience. The transition between waking and sleeping becomes recognizable as the 700 steps to deeper slumber, each stage of drowsiness a mapped territory you can navigate with increasing precision. The hypnagogic images that arise in the moments before sleep reveal themselves as glimpses of the enchanted wood, their strange familiarity explained by their correspondence to mapped coordinates. The recursive loops of anxious thought show themselves as inadvertent navigation through regions of Leng, where effects precede causes and worry generates the very outcomes it fears. You sit by a window at dusk, and the room does something to your attention like a key entering a lock. The same way a stage does something to a crowd when the first chord is held just long enough to turn a note into a threshold. The recognition becomes recursive, each acknowledgement of correspondence creating deeper correspondence. The maps have taught you to read your own consciousness as navigable territory, while your consciousness has learned to recognize itself in the map's descriptions. Every doorway becomes a potential portal when approached with proper attention. Every staircase offers descent into illuminated depths when counted with appropriate rhythm. Every mirror reflects not just image, but possibility of passage when viewed from angles the maps have taught you to recognize. You cannot say the gate is elsewhere when it opens in your mouth as you speak a name twice. You cannot claim ignorance when your hand reaches for a doorknob and the brass is cooler than the air as if touched by night. The cascade completes itself in the understanding that there was never a time when you were not navigating these territories. The maps did not create access to exotic realms. They provided vocabulary for experiences that were always occurring. Sleep has always been a journey through mapped territories. Dreams have always followed cartographic principles. Consciousness has always operated according to the navigation techniques the maps describe. The final recognition arrives with the gentleness of settling dust. You are both the consciousness reading about these territories and the territories being read about. The maps have always been describing you. The stage brightens enough to show its scaffolds. The audience hums. The curtain is half raised, and the next revelation waits not in distant territories, but in the recognition that the entities themselves are principles wearing masks, cosmic functions masquerading as characters in a drama where you are simultaneously audience, actor, and stage. The stage brightens enough to show its scaffolds. The audience hums. The curtain is half raised. Entities step on, but we will not be fooled. We will call them by their jobs. The ultimate reframe reveals that the great old ones and outer gods are not simply monstrous beings, but embodiments of cosmic laws, living manifestations of alien physics, impossible geometries, and the sheer indifferent vastness of existence. This is the creation inversion twist. Beginnings are veils, voids, not light, order. Yog-Sothoth's mask is a cluster, globed and luminous, an organ you cannot name. Behind it, the rule that any two ideas close together may touch, and touching makes passage. That is how Carter becomes several. That is how Gilman's angles cut. The key and the gate are the same because a door is function plus permission. The phrase is a mantra. It yokes an abstraction to a sound you can say in the dark. Adjacency is the cosmic principle. When two unlike things are brought near, the space between them becomes active. In your own experience, this manifests as the spark that jumps between childhood memory and present grief, the recognition that creates momentary doorways consciousness navigates without effort. Every hyperlink clicked, every association followed from breakfast to loss to the sound of rain on tin operates according to Yog-Sothoth's principle. The entity's spherical clusters represent all possible adjacencies existing simultaneously, every potential connection between disparate elements of experience. Nyarlathotep's mask is human. He walks like a man in Cairo. He plays instruments. He shows wonders. He whispers in crowds. Behind the mask, the insight that horror travels not as fact, but as performance. The master of ceremonies is the algorithm, the trending tale, the lecture that unbuttons one more button as you lean. In the haunter of the dark, a crystal draws gaze and doom. In the prose poem of Nyarlathotep, a city is led by spectacle to an electric ruin. The messenger adapts medium. Tonight, it is this video. The cadence itself is his. Nyarlathotep embodies transmission, the way ideas propagate through consciousness by adapting to available channels. Every compelling voice that makes you lean closer, every story that spreads because it scratches an itch you didn't know you had, every algorithm that learns your preferences and feeds them back with slight variations, these are his contemporary masks. He succeeds not through force, but through seduction, offering exactly what consciousness craves. Novelty wrapped in familiarity, transgression made safe through ritual. Azathoth, the blind idiot god, is not just a slumbering demon sultan, but the blind idiot chaos at the heart of all creation, the ultimate source of all reality, which paradoxically means its absence of order is the order. The universe did not begin with a benevolent spark, but with an unthinking, dreaming void. This reframe means that the horror is not an external threat to be vanquished, but an inherent, inescapable condition of reality itself. Azathoth represents groundless ground, existence resting not on solid foundation, but on pure contingency, accident elevated to cosmic status. The demon sultan's court of flute-playing entities represents the arbitrary nature of physical constants, the random parameters that happen to allow matter to coalesce into patterns complex enough to contemplate their own groundlessness. The horror lies not in malevolence, but in complete indifference, the recognition that consciousness arose from processes that neither intended nor value its existence. Eric Zann's violin is a barricade. The black beyond his window is pressure like water against glass. His bow draws, lattice work across absence, sound as scaffolding. You can feel splinters under your fingers as he plays. You can smell rosin like pine. The principle is conservation. Pattern holds shape. Chaos erodes. Zann's music cannot make a door, but it can shore up a wall. The map has safe rooms, and their keys are songs. Zann embodies pattern as resistance, the way consciousness maintains coherence against entropy through repetition, rhythm, and structure. His violin work represents all human activities that create temporary islands of order within chaos: ritual, art, habit, love. Every song hummed while walking alone, every prayer repeated until meaning becomes muscle memory, every bedtime story that makes the night feel smaller. These are applications of Zann's principle. Law is also a mask. In Ulthar, no man may kill a cat. The statute is memory sealed in civic ritual. It binds not because a judge sits in a robe, but because a town reenacts a story. Law makes a boundary between acceptable and taboo. Boundary is a kind of door label. Do not enter, do not exit. We know how viewers behave when told, do not. Ritual makes the map legible by common consent. The law of Othar represents collective memory crystallized into behavioral constraint. Laws function not through enforcement, but through the community's agreement to remember and repeat specific stories about consequences. This principle operates in every social group. The unspoken agreements that govern behavior, the shared stories that define identity, the rituals that reinforce group boundaries. The stage is self-aware. Lovecraft uses meta-lexicon, curtain, audience, stage, more subtly than we think. He writes as if reading to a child at the foot of a bed. He knows the carry of a bedtime cadence. He constructs scenes like sets, a window, a chair, a moon bar on the floor. Then, when your guard is down, he places an angle, a sign, a proper noun with gravity. The idea acts, and the harm is minor at first. A sleepless night, your eyes on the ceiling seam. The meta-theatrical elements reveal Lovecraft's awareness that horror operates through performance rather than content. The bedtime cadence lulls consciousness into receptive states where ideas can take root without triggering defensive responses. Each entity principle continues operating in contemporary forms. Yog-Sothoth manifests in hyperlink culture, where any text can connect to any other, through adjacency algorithms. Nyarlathotep thrives in social media, adapting transmission methods to each platform's affordances. Azathoth hums in background radiation, the white noise that reminds consciousness of cosmic insignificance. Zan's principle operates in every attempt to create meaning through repetition and structure. The recognition that entities are principles wearing masks leads to understanding. You have been interacting with these forces throughout your life, learning their operations through experience disguised as entertainment. The maps have been teaching you to recognize principles that were always active in your consciousness, always shaping your experience of reality. The horror is not that entities hate you, it is that the stage does not see you at all. Keep concrete anchors near. The violin scent of rosin, the cat's weight on the foot of the bed, fog moving between sodium lamps like slow thought. These are your handles when ideas try to lift you by the scruff. The next territory opens not in distant realms, but in the recognition of how these ancient principles echo through contemporary consciousness, manifesting in the very neuroscience and culture that shape modern awareness. A brain at night is a theater with its own electrician. The default mode network hums when you are at rest, replaying, recombining, setting scene. This neural circuitry, active during wakeful rest, creates the internal narrative stream where consciousness observes itself, stitching private constellations between unalike memories. The hippocampus lays place cells like lanterns along a street. Grid cells knit a lattice under them, a Yog-Sothoth of firing patterns in miniature. Adjacency is literally how you remember. This face next to that street, this smell next to that door. Memory functions through spatial metaphors, creating navigable landscapes where concepts exist in relationship rather than isolation. Dreams practice the route, unregulated by the same police that manage daytime traffic, allowing associations to form according to emotional and symbolic logic rather than rational causation. Hypnagogia, the fog between lamp-off and sleep, produces images that feel placed without being placed. A boat on black water, a mask with no face behind, a staircase that is also a throat. Many of Lovecraft's thresholds live here. The enchanted wood is a limbic thicket. The 700 steps are a respiratory ladder. Night gaunts are falling reflexes given costume. Neurologically, the thalamus relaxes its gatekeeping function as consciousness transitions toward sleep, allowing internal neural activity to be perceived with the vividness typically reserved for external stimuli. The map is projective. The door is permission. What appears as interdimensional gateway corresponds to states where the boundary between inner and outer experience becomes permeable. We can measure the repetition. Prose cadence that repeats phrases entrains neural oscillations. This is not sorcery. It is rhythm. Brain waves synchronize with external rhythmic stimuli through neural entrainment. Lovecraft's long, hypnotic sentences broken by short declarative statements create patterns that encourage the brain to shift from beta waves toward alpha and theta frequencies linked to relaxed awareness. ASMR, the contemporary lullaby, operates similarly. Soft voice, rustle of page, the tap of a nail on glass. You relax. Boundaries soften. Ideas enter more easily. Nyarlathotep's mask smiles from a modern platform. The algorithmic messenger adapts. Transmission to each medium, curating personalized content that maximizes engagement, while the medium helps the message put on slippers and find your living room. Pop culture replays Dreamlands in new masks. Nolan's Inception turns dreams into heists with architectural tricks, angles, and kicks, while Sandman walks the politics of a sleep kingdom. Both recognize dreams as navigable territories with their own physics. Indie games model walking through liminal spaces, pools under fluorescent light, carpet soaked, the smell of chlorine and old air. The sensation is precise, familiar, unfamiliar, the uncanny corridor. You have been there in a mall at night. You have been there in a half-remembered hotel. You carry the map. The popularity of liminal aesthetics suggests collective recognition of threshold territories existing in the margins of ordinary experience. Physics does its own performance. Topology tells us a coffee cup and a donut are the same if you are only counting holes. The universe is not Euclidean in ways that matter at the largest scales. Einstein's relativity reveals space-time as curved rather than flat, with massive objects creating distortions that affect time's passage. Time is not a line so much as a woven cloth. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation affects reality at fundamental levels, consciousness and physical phenomena existing in interdependence that mirrors the relationship between navigator and territory. Yog-Sothoth's mask grins because it is right to claim access where adjacency is formal, not local. The dream door models a deeper permission. Any system can be recoordinated if you change the questions you ask of it. Psychology supports the cost calculations. Dissociation is not a spook story. It is a coping mechanism. The mind's ability to separate awareness from immediate experience serves protective functions, allowing consciousness to observe rather than fully inhabit overwhelming situations. Spend too many hours in inner marble plazas and your waking body becomes weightless in your own hands. Extended engagement with internal landscapes can create depersonalization where ordinary experience feels distant. Yet guided imagery heals. The Dreamlands can be therapy if applied with care. The ethics from Kurene's returns honor the body, pay tax in both directions, maintain two citizenships. Modern technology amplifies ancient principles. Social media algorithms function as Nyarlathotep's contemporary mask, learning preferences and feeding them back with variations that maximize engagement. Search engines create Yog-Sothoth adjacencies, connecting any concept to any other through hyperlink pathways. Streaming services curate personalized content that adapts to viewing patterns, creating echo chambers while gradually introducing novelty. We are modern enough to smile at monsters and keep the principles. We can read Lovecraft's unfortunate prejudices as masks that failed his humane intent, a stain on the stage that scholars acknowledge but refuse to polish into innocence. His personal fears infected his work with xenophobia that contradicts the cosmic perspective his best insights achieved. Even so, the structural insights remain: ideas as contagions, law as memory, music as brace, knowledge as gate. The horror is not that entities hate you, it is that the stage does not see you at all. Keep concrete anchors near: the weight of a cat at your feet, fog moving between sodium lamps like old clerks, the clean slap of water against a pier. The next territory requires return to the beginning, completing the circle with deepened understanding. We return to the hill at sunset. The fence under your hand is warm from the day's sun. The chimney's smoke rises violet into a sky holding its breath. You have traversed 12 rooms, touched 12 signs, and listened to a cadence that moved you like a tide. Now you gather the map and fold it so it fits in a pocket you did not know you had, a space newly opened by the act of knowing. The covenant is simple and grave. You're on the map you read. The gateways between reality and dream are not hidden in distant dimensions or ancient ruins. They exist in the act of attention, in the rituals you repeat, in the shape of a name spoken twice in the half-light. Yog-Sothoth's lattice is the adjacency of your own thoughts, the way memory and desire, grief and hope brush against each other, opening passages you follow almost without knowing. Nyarlathotep's stage is the channel you watch at midnight, the comfort of a familiar voice in the dark, the algorithm that learns your preferences and draws you deeper, line by line. Zan's barrier is the habit that steadies you when blackness presses in. The cup of tea at the same hour, the song you hum on empty streets, the prayer that becomes muscle memory in your hands. Ulthar's law is your private vow, the kindness you extend to what is gentle and watching in your life. The witch house is the room you make wrong by starving or overfilling your life with abstraction. Forgetting to ground yourself in the weight of the world, let us stop pretending the entities choose. They are principles, functions, algorithms, patterns, operating with neither love nor malice. The horror that there is no audience to your performance but you is also a mercy. Indifference frees you to choose your rituals without fear of punishment or reward. The cost ledger is yours to balance. Sleep, but set an alarm. Dream, but drink water. Walk the 700 steps into deeper slumber, but also walk outside on a real hill, feel the grass bend beneath your foot, touch the fence, feed a cat, sing at your window when the night feels large. These small acts are anchors, compasses in the shifting cartography of consciousness. You are implicated because the idea has acted on you. You have rehearsed looking. You have learned the cadence. Thresholds that were once invisible now reveal themselves in the ordinary. The cool draft in a doorway that makes you think of a curtain half raised, the scent of cedar that conjures the image of a hidden key, the angle of the ceiling that hints at impossible geometry. None of these are harmful. All of them are maps now etched into your internal landscape. The danger and the wonder are that the map begins to route you, paying with your attention first, then with pieces of identity if you travel too far too fast, if you neglect your anchors. There is a circular echo worth honoring. We began with a velvet curtain and the quiet promise that knowledge has a cost. We end with the curtain lowering, a hush, and an acceptance of the cost as the price of being a thinking creature who dreams. The thesis whispers, beginnings are not light bursting from the void, but veils parted in darkness. Each image you allow to become a street and walk down is a small act of creation. Each boundary, not a wall, but a frame for a gate. Inversion completes the circle. The gate is not a hole, but the wall itself is a stage for transition. We widen our last frame to a sea. The water is black-green, reflecting a bruised sky, and something city-shaped sleeps beneath it, dreaming. Relia dreams its dreaming God. And all of this, too, is a map. Another journey could chart that oceanic atlas, how fertility and rot and pressure build a cosmology where surfacing is catastrophe and worship is pressure equalization. For now, we close where we began, with a safe transgression, a bedtime voice that walked you toward a door and left you with the decency of choice. Step through when you wish, step back when you must. Leave the curtain hanging loose enough to find in the dark with 2 fingers. Keep the key where your hand can guess its shape. Teach the cadence gently to those who ask. Never force it on a mind unready. Knowledge is always a gate. Consent is its hinge. The condition is not a question. It is a fact. You will dream. You will wake. Between them is a stage lit low, a hush where audience and actor are the same animal, breathing together. The hill will be there when you need it, grass rough, fence warm, smoke violet, sky held. You are in the circle now. Keep the map near. It will keep you too.